Hi, this is Chef Sokol. On today's show, we're going to be discussing truffles.
Welcome to Baking Radio. Learn the art and science of baking with author, educator, and award-winning chef, Chef Sokol. Whether you've been baking your whole life or you're brand new to the world of baking and you're looking to build your confidence and learn new skills in the kitchen, you're in the right place. This is Baking Radio.
So on today's show, we're going to be talking about truffles. And you may have heard of a couple of types of truffles. One type is a fungus that is prized for its earthy flavor, and it's like hundreds of dollars, and it's hunted by specially trained pigs in Italy. We are not talking about that type of truffle, although they're delicious and they can be shaved over beautiful risottos and dishes like that. We are going to be talking about chocolate truffles. Big surprise, right? We had just got done with our chocolate trifecta, and let's define truffles, and then let's make some and talk about the nuances of creating them and making them look spectacular. So what is a truffle? A truffle is just a rich, creamy chocolate candy, usually made from heavy cream, butter, sugar, and other flavorings. It's formed into rough balls and then sometimes dipped in melted chocolate, or it can be just rolled in unsweetened cocoa powder. Basically, it's ganache with extra additions added to it. So on a previous show, we did talk about ganache, and it's fabulous. It can be anything from a sauce over an ice cream sundae to a frosting if you let it chill over some ice water. Make it like an ice water bath. You can take ganache and let it chill and set up so it's a little bit thicker and spreadable on your chocolate cake. We can also make the center of a candy that we call truffles. That's what we're doing today. So ganache is denser and sometimes a little richer than just a plain old ganache because it has a lot more chocolate to cream ratio. So the ratio is what it's all about in determining how rich a ganache is. And we talked about that when we did our ganache show. And today we're going to have about a 3-to-1 ratio of chocolate to cream. So for example, if I have 12 ounces of chocolate, I'm only going to add a half a cup of heavy cream. So about a 3-to-1 ratio. So that's a lot of chocolate to cream. What this means is when we melt it down, it'll be a little thicker, but when we chill it, it'll get almost like, I don't know, like a mud patty in the springtime, sort of like wet, but it'll hold together. All right. Almost like a burger patty, sort of holding it together. And then we roll it. We chill it, and then we can do many different things to this delightful little niblet truffle. So a simple recipe for truffles. Let's just talk about a simple recipe. And I don't have a recipe for you per se, but you can just do an offshoot of this in any type of chocolate you want. It could be milk chocolate. It could be semi-sweet chocolate. It could be white chocolate. I've made white chocolate truffles. I've made all different types. So typical recipe, here it comes. Half a cup of heavy cream. Bring it to a simmer in a saucepan and put 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter in with it. Remove it from the heat once it comes to a boil and your butter's melted, and you're going to whisk in 2 cups or 12 ounces of bittersweet chocolate. And that bittersweet chocolate should be finely chopped. So you really want it to be all the same size, tiny, so it will melt evenly and melt completely. After the chocolate melts and the mixture becomes thick and viscous and beautiful, you want to pour it into a bowl and you're going to place it in the freezer until the mixture becomes firm enough to hold its shape. So I take a spoon after a couple hours or even an hour first, depends on your freezer and how strong and cold it is. Take a spoon and sort of take a spoonful of it, hold it up, and see how it falls back into the remaining ganache, and see if it's super thick, if it holds its shape. If it doesn't, stir it and keep it in the freezer. So in the meantime, while you're freezing, don't go out shopping for 4 hours, because your ganache is going to be like literally hard as a rock, and you'll have to thaw and start over again. So stay home, stay around, wait for it to get firm. Get a sheet pan, cover it with wax paper or even parchment paper, and sprinkle it with unsweetened cocoa powder. And I use a sieve usually to do this, and just sort of sprinkle it over evenly. And then after the ganache, because that's what it really is, the truffle base, I usually take about a tablespoon. Those are big truffles. If you want them smaller, you can take sort of heaping teaspoonfuls. You can even make tinier ones and make half a teaspoon ones, truffles. They're not going to look like truffles right away. So this is just the first part of what we're going to do to make them look beautiful. So you're going to take, let's say, tablespoonfuls. We're going to make big ones. And you're just going to take a tablespoon and plop it onto the cocoa dusted sheet pan. And you're going to end up with about 16 to 20 spoonfuls. If you use teaspoons, you're going to end up with a lot more than that. And if you add half a teaspoon, you're going to really make a lot of truffles. You're going to put the pan in the freezer. And if you have a sheet pan that won't fit in your freezer, because sometimes freezers are small, you can use a pie plate with a little unsweetened cocoa powder, or you can just use a dinner plate or a serving platter that fits in your freezer. Put them in the freezer just until they're firm enough that you could probably roll them in your hand, sort of like clay, sort of like the consistency of clay. And you're going to roll each truffle. So leave it in the freezer for maybe 15, 20 minutes until it gets malleable, clay-like. Take it out of the freezer, put it on your work area, and on the sheet pan, stay on that sheet pan, because your hands are going to get cocoa-y. And you're going to roll each truffle, remember it already had cocoa powder on it, into a perfect ball. Okay, don't grease your hands. Don't put anything on your hands, maybe just a little cocoa powder. Once you get a perfect ball, I want you to set these beautiful truffle balls onto a clean sheet pan lined with paper again, or maybe a plate or whatever you have that fits in your freezer, and freeze them. This time, you're going to freeze them until they're hard as rocks. Okay, so you can freeze them up to several days. You can freeze them for 3 or 4 months, as long as they're airtight. So when they're totally frozen, take the sheet pan out, and you can even put them in a Ziploc bag or a little airtight container. And then you're going to place them keep them in the freezer until you're ready to make a decision to dip or not to dip. Should we dip our truffle? And what does that mean? So we can either dip the truffle in melted chocolate, which is a very personal decision, or you can leave it as it is and just roll it in more unsweetened cocoa powder and just put on a serving platter or a little tiny candy, paper liner, and serve them. That's it. You can give them to your friends like that. They're delicious. The other thing you can do, if you don't want to dip them, but you want to sort of kick them up a little bit and into another level, you can actually take a perfect raspberry, dry, of course, very dry. Chocolate and water never go together. Or you can take a perfect almond or a walnut half and form that blob of ganache when you form your truffle over that particular piece of fruit without squishing it, or your nut, and just sort of roll it together. So whoever bites into it gets a little surprise, gets a nut or a little piece of fresh fruit. And it's absolutely delicious to do that. Or even a chocolate covered coffee bean. Oh, that would be so good. Once they're frozen, you have to decide. So if you want to dip, you can melt some chocolate, and that you should do over a double boiler, as we've always talked about. And then, because I'm turning into a record that's broken, I keep telling you how to melt your chocolate and use the double boiler. So you're going to melt chocolate. You have to decide, you're going to keep your truffles in the refrigerator. You don't need to temper the chocolate, of course. And You can use compound chocolate if you want your truffles to be at room temperature and you're not going to refrigerate them. But we're going to assume you're not tempering them, all right? So you're just going to melt regular chocolate. And if you find your chocolate's a little gloppy, sometimes it can be, depending upon how humid it is in your kitchen, you can add a little vegetable oil to thin it out a little, which will simulate the cocoa butter, but not quite. Or you can actually go to a cocoa or a candy store or certain specialty store. And I just bought these little tiny discs of cocoa butter. You believe that? I actually bought them. They're a little expensive. And then you can put a few in with your melting chocolate and it will actually create this beautiful, thinner, dippable, less viscous chocolate mass of melted chocolate. So you can use the compound chocolate. Remember, this is the chocolate that has no cocoa butter in it. But it doesn't need tempering, but it can get a little temperamental and it won't taste as good. So once you dip your truffle, there are special tools to use. You can take they have these elongated forks, 2-prong forks that you can buy. And they also have these tools that look like a thin metal stick with a circle at the end of it that's hollow. And your truffle would sort of sit into the chocolate and then you would lift it out of the chocolate with this tool. And that would allow the excess melted chocolate to sort of drip off. And after you get all that excess off, you give it a little sort of bang, bang, bang against the side of your saucepan or your little bowl. And then you can sort of, put it onto your sheet pan, your clean sheet pan lined with wax paper or aluminum foil or parchment paper. So you can do that. Or you can use a regular fork. And I've done that too. And that works fine too. Make sure you get the excess chocolate off because it will leave a big pool on the bottom and you'll end up with, it almost will look like a toadstool on the bottom. And you can cut that off afterwards, but it will look a little funny. After it's dipped and you put it on your sheet pan, you can then cover it with stuff or roll it in stuff. So sometimes I make little bowls of pre-chopped nuts, maybe chopped almonds, chopped walnuts, pecans, any chopped nut you want, pistachios, and you can drop your melted, your ganache from your melted chocolate instead of dropping it on the sheet pan, drop it into these little bowls of shredded nuts or chopped nuts or shredded coconut, and then just roll it with usually a fork and then gently lift it out. It's going to get bigger. It's going to be like a snowball. You know how you start with a little snowball and you want to make a snowman and you put it on the snowy ground and you roll it and it builds by collecting the snow that's around it. Well, that's what this is going to do. The melted chocolate's going to add heft and bulk to your truffle. So now you're going to have like golf ball sized truffles, and I'm all for that. There's no problem with that. If you want to make them a little smaller, just know if you do roll them in things like coconut and nuts, they will get bigger. And then you can just put them on your sheet pan, and they do have to chill and keep chilled until serving time. So you can do that. You can also dip them in different colors. So I sometimes make dark chocolate truffles, and then I take white chocolate and melt a bunch of white chocolate, like a pound of white chocolate. And then I dip my dark truffle center into the white chocolate. Now, sometimes because it's so dark on the inside, I have to dip it twice because you will see the chocolate, the dark chocolate on the inside. So you can do that. You can even take a white chocolate truffle and dip that into dark chocolate. What I did once, this is so cool. I actually made truffles for a cake competition, and my cake was flavored predominantly with coconut. There was many different layers, and I made miniature coconut truffles, but they looked like miniature coconuts when you broke into them. So I cut them in half, and they actually looked like little tiny miniature coconuts, like fresh from the tree. It was amazing. It was so cool. So there are many things that you can do. Now, you can also get this beautiful chocolate called couverture that we have talked about on previous shows, which is a very high quality chocolate and is quite smooth, but it does have to be tempered because it does have cocoa butter. And that's what makes it so smooth. So again, there are many different things that you can do. If you don't want to dip your truffle, don't. Traditional truffles will just be rolled in cocoa powder and served as is. And they are delicious because in the fridge, when they're chilled, that ganache will get nice and firm and you will be biting into this beautiful, it's almost like fudge, but it's better than fudge. Much, much better than fudge. Now, I'm going to give you some tips. Best truffles. All right, so the best truffle making tips. First of all, you want to use the highest quality chocolate that you can buy, and it should be mostly cocoa butter. So if you can afford a really nice chocolate, get a nice chocolate. You're not going to need that much, but it really will make a difference in your tasting. You want to chop it, again, so it's into small, fine pieces. It will help it melt evenly and create a smooth and creamy truffle. And then you want to make sure that that truffle mixture freezes or firms up in the fridge so it can hold its shape. Because you don't want to be rolling liquid ganache all over your fingers because literally it will not work. You're going to have to make it a little bit more solid than that. So there we have it. Truffles are super simple to make, and you can make a professional showing of truffles for all your family and friends. I used to give them as gifts to my kids' teachers in little candy boxes, and they couldn't wait for them every single holiday season. They went absolutely nuts over them. So if you have any questions, head on over to bakingradio.com and leave me a message. I would love to answer some of your questions on air. And if you've enjoyed this episode today, please hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it.